Om Tat Sat. Welcome to Gyan Bhakti channel from Swami Nikhilananda. My humble prostrations to the all-pervading Brahman, to my worshipful Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayanandaji Maharaj, to Ram Parivar, all sages and saints, and to each of you divine soul watching today's satsang. We are currently studying the holy scripture, Mysticism of Ramayana. Commentary is by my Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayanandaji Maharaj, narrated by myself, Swami Nikhilananda. So in today's satsang, we will be covering the awakening by Kamadeva Shiva from his samadhi. So Kamadeva tries to use his charm to awaken Shiva while he is in samadhi. Samadhi means when you're in a meditative state where you have transcended time and space. That is the true meaning of samadhi. Not just closing our eyes and still seeing things around or feeling things around within us. That means you have totally crossed that dimension. During the period when Shiva was immersed in samadhi, there arose a demon named Taraka who became so powerful that all beings as well as gods came under his power. He had received a boon from Brahma. Devoid of happiness and prosperity, the gods again and again waged war against Taraka and were defeated. In despair, they went to Brahmaji and sought his help. O gods, do not worry, said Brahmaji, the creator. There is a way to destroy this demon. If Shiva were blessed with the sun, that sun alone could have the power to kill Taraka, because that was the boon he had asked. Tarakasur had asked Brahmaji that may I live forever, and Brahmaji said, well, that's not possible. Then Tarakaji said, this Tarakasur, the demon, said, well, then I should only be killed by Shiva's son, because he knew Shiva was a yogi, a dispassionate sadhu. He would never marry anybody. He could never have a son, and that was practically impossible. So that's how now the whole project is coming together, where Brahmaji knows that the only way he can help the gods and bring harmony back is by Shiva trying to have a son, he says. So he says no one else can do so. So therefore, instead of fighting the demon, let us direct all our energies to seeing that Shiva marries as soon as possible. Uma has practiced intense austerity and she is eagerly waiting to marry Shiva. But Shiva in the meanwhile had entered into deep samadhi. Though it is a difficult task to bring Shiva back to a normal state of consciousness, yet I have an ingenious plan for doing so. We will persuade Kama, the spirit of passion, Kamadev, to use all of his resources to fight with Shiva and thus awaken him from his meditation. So that was the plan Brahmaji and the other gods came up with. The moment Shiva comes out of his meditative absorption, we will immediately fall at his feet and compel him to marry Uma. This plan was unanimously agreed upon, and the gods summoned the great Cupid god, also known as Kamadev, and explained their request. Eager to be of help, yet internally convinced that his end was surely in sight, Kama took his bow and arrow and started out towards the abode of Lord Shiva with his companions, the spirit of spring and pleasure. So that is the essence of Kamadeva. His bow and arrow is not sharp and like a weapon. It is actually made up of flowers and jasmine and beautiful incense and spring season and pleasure. In other words, ecstasy and joy of desires. During the short time it took Kama to get to Shiva's realm, his powers were blossoming with such full force that the entire world became overpowered by passion, and all the regulations set by the Vedas were given up. People were intoxicated by passion due to Kamadeva's active involvement. All living beings at every level, even men who claimed themselves to be great siddhas and vairagis, men of yogic attainments and dispassion, became completely overpowered by kama, desire. So this is a warning for us that as we walk on the spiritual journey and we think we have controlled our passion and all these things, it is not such a simple thing. Whenever we get tested, that is when we will know how much water we really are in. As we see, when kama's influence was in full force, lot of siddhas and vairagis even came under its sway. It was like a great flood and all drowned in it except those who were devoted to Rama. Rama meaning Brahman. Any Ishta Devata is okay as long as we understand that all these gods represent that same Brahman. Only these advanced devotees remained untainted by this great force that Kama exerted while warming up in his battle with Shiva. So such is the influence of Kama. So we should never underestimate the force of passion and lust. When Kama finally arrived at Kailash, the abode of Shiva, he saw Shiva from a distance and suddenly a terror struck in his heart. He realized that there was no way that he could have his sway over that great god. At that moment, the whole world became free of Kama's influence. Why? Because Kama himself withdrew. He kind of retracted. And when he was in full force, the passion and that power was prevalent everywhere. So this is how people got a bit of relief. All the jivas or individual souls came back to their normal state, realizing that they have been behaving as though drunk. So, staring fearfully at the sublime face of Shiva, Kama realized that if he did not keep his promise to risk all for the sake of the gods, it would be a great degradation, and he did not want to do that. Therefore, he resolved anew to exercise all his resources to awaken Shiva. However, no matter how hard he tried, Shiva did not wake up from his samadhi. With renewed determination, Kamadeva finally jumped upon the branches of a tree, put on a flowery arrow on his bow, and stretched the string of the bow to the utmost, aiming straight at the heart of Shiva. He discharged that arrow. Struck by that vehement force, Shiva woke up from samadhi to see what had happened. Kama, in the meanwhile, quickly hid himself behind the leaves of the tree. He got scared. Shiva first opened his two normal eyes, but he could not see Kamadeva. Then he opened his third eye, that is also called the Agnya Chakra. For most of us, it is hidden. For Lord Shiva, it opens up, and that's why we see him with his third eye open. That is the transcendental eye. Our two normal eyes just give us the vision of the world process, but the third eye is transcendental. It connects us to God and also with our heart inside. The moment he opened his third eye, everything was magnified, and even the subtle form of Kamadev hiding behind the leaves became visible to him. Then a blazing light shot through his third eye and burnt Kamadev into ashes, like lightning falling from a treetop. And when the wife of Kama, Rati, that's her name, Rati, the principle of passionate delight, that's what Rati means, heard what had happened to her husband, she came before Shiva crying and grieving and praying to Shiva for his blessings. Shiva became pleased with that helpless lady and said, "O Rati, do not be upset. Your husband will not be utterly destroyed. He will still exist in the form in this world and without form, and exert his power in a subtle form, but without a physical body. However, you will be able to be with him in a physical form in another yuga." So there's an interesting story in Srimad Bhagavat Puran, which we will cover at some other time. But he was born as Pradumna, and Rati waited for him all this while, knowing that her husband, who is now formless, would come back to form. So seeing Shiva fully awake after the encounter with Kamadeva, the gods came to him and they all praised him, saying, "O Shiva, we are all internally delighted with the perspective of your coming marriage to Uma Devi, and we can hardly wait to witness this glorious sight with our own eyes." So Shiva said, "May it be so, tathastu." And the gods were overjoyed that their plan had succeeded after all, and they made ready for the upcoming wedding. Brahma then sent the 7 sages to the abode of Uma to inform her about all that had transpired. Appearing before her, they said, "O Uma, see what has happened. Shiva has burnt up the very principle of Kamadev, which is involved in all marriages. So therefore, forget about marrying Shiva." Uma smiled and said, "O wise sages, Shiva has never been under the power of Kamadeva. For him, Kama has been burnt up all along. Further, Shiva never really did anything to destroy Kamadeva. If Kama was destroyed when he approached Shiva, Shiva is not at fault. Shiva did not do anything at all. He was meditating. And it is just the nature of things that when the principle of darkness approaches the principle of light, the darkness becomes nullified." So what a beautiful example. The minute the ray of sun comes, darkness runs away. So Shiva, in front of Shiva, Kamadeva could not hold his existence. The sages, hearing these words of Uma, were immensely delighted. They bowed down to Uma with great reverence, and then they proceeded to speak with her father, King Hemavant, about the forthcoming marriage. So a disciple should be like Parvati Devi, like Uma. At all costs, you achieve your desired goal, which is moksha, liberation, your Ishta Devata. All these things are not just theoretical, they are very practical. People, sages, saints have actually achieved them in this very life, and we can also, if we enjoy the nectar of satsanga and we resolve to spiritualize our daily life. This is all for today, and we will be covering more in tomorrow's satsang. This is Swami Nikhilanand. Om Tat Sat.